Blessings. Welcome back, everyone. Happy solstice, Yule, winter holidays to everyone. I'm astrologer Elsa Wadsworth and joined again today with astrologer Martien Hermes. Thank you so much, Martien, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure and an honor. A
It
few
is.
things. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a beautiful relationship. So looking forward to this one very much today and many more.
Okay. So
So,
am I.
okay. Awesome. So just before we get started, both of us have a couple things, just news that we want to bring forward. So I am with Matt from the Astrologer's Encyclopedia and Christopher, who I will be introducing more to the channel. So for those of you who aren't introduced to Christopher, he will be a part of this project as well. I should say Christopher Scott. We are doing a book club. We recently finished Demetra George's second volume, but for the new year, January, we're starting our Firmicus Maternus Mathesis book club. So we're going to go through the book in its entirety. This is Ben Dyke's translation of Firmicus Maternus. It's sure to be exciting. We are very much looking forward to it. We will be meeting the last Monday of every month, and our first meeting is January 29th, 2024. So please join us for that. You can find many different tiers and levels of support on our Patreon. So join us for Mathesis. And everybody who is watching this that's already a patron, thank you. And you can go ahead and head there to Patreon to find the date for our holiday party. So go ahead and go over there to find the date for the holiday party. And then we have some exciting news to share with you, Martien. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Planet Dance? We're about to, I didn't know when was the best time to introduce this because we're about to introduce a technique, and this technique will have some support through Planet Dance. I wanted to kind of maybe wait till the end and let you know that you could find it there, but then I'm like, oh, if people don't watch all the way through, let's just bring it up in the first part of the video and it'll make more sense later. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Planet Dance is this fantastic free software. Uh, I'm befriended with the maker of it, and the interesting thing that he did, he wrote his own computer language to be able to program this software very easily. And a lot of people are using it and introducing their own thing into it. And there's one guy called Ed, and he has a wizard called Ed Greek, which is, of course, all about Hellenistic astrology with some medieval astrology mixed in. And I asked him, could you introduce this idea of the joint domicile master into it? Because he's at the moment rewriting his wizard. So, and he was open to that. And he also introduced, for instance, Zodiacal releasing, which I asked him to do. And Jean Crane was the one who developed this software, was into that. So they both worked on that, and perfection is in it. So it's a very broad program because I only use a very small part of it because I'm only interested in the medieval and the Hellenistic stuff. So that's for me, but people are very enthusiastic about what it can do because this is a free software that's very interesting, and it's very broad. It covers all sorts of principles of astrology, modern astrology as well. And whenever you have a problem, you can simply write the author of this program to introduce something or alter something or whatever. And he also has his own YouTube page. No, not a YouTube page. The other one, the other channel. What's it called? I forget. I
Is it
forget.
a video? Well, either way, we'll link it in
Yeah,
the,
right.
we'll link
That's great.
all the information for it. So if we don't have it like right on hand, we'll have it
Yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
But I think that's amazing that you are able to like reach out and have that kind of
Mhm.
direct contact, that he makes himself available for that is really
Yeah,
amazing.
that's really
Um,
awesome. Yeah. It is.
So we will put that below. And
Mhm.
as Martien just mentioned, he mentioned joint domicile master. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I think I'm going to just kind of convention it as Sunoikodespotes, which is meaning
Mhm.
joint domicile master.
Right.
Um, so this is a beautiful and exciting, I guess you could call it a technique, but maybe a method that
Right.
sometimes feels lost on people, but it's mentioned so many times in, of course, Robert Schmidt's work, which is
Mhm.
we know, or if people know your work, you're very influenced, and myself as well, consider Robert Schmidt primary teacher. So he's elucidating this through a lot of his lectures and through his work. But also, some of you know that I'm doing a very close read of Valens in a private study group, and it comes up again and again within Valens from like beginning to end, right? So it's just always being elucidated in Valens as well. So it does have a really strong base. So if you guys have questions about the base for this technique or like anything that you want to ask, please feel free to reach out to Martien in the comments below or through email, or just engage with us if you do have questions, comments, concerns, anything like that. We're definitely willing to do another video about it or just correspond, sort of helping and teaching the technique or
Right.
the concept. So Sunoikodespotes or joint domicile master, this has a lot of implications with inside of just the framework and the understanding of the Hellenistic fundamentals, I guess I would say, but
Mhm.
also uh it's it has a acute primary use, I would say. Like there's a use for understanding this fundamental, and this would be a technique for aversion. This is why I find it very, very exciting, because a lot of times we understand that aversion is this inability to see, and like kind of, and then that's where it's left. We're like, oh, well, that planet maybe can't do much, or it can't see it. And then you're, especially in a reading, you might be at a loss for how else to describe that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Like, then what, right? So this is sort of a solution for that that is very exciting. So do you want
Mhm.
to just take us away? You have a slideshow. You're going to bring us through the
Yeah.
method.
Yep. I will. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, the interesting thing about joint domicile masters, the Sunoikodespotes, is that it's actually addressing the issue of what planet is doing what exactly in the natal chart. So let's have a look. Let's first have a look at the principle of this issue. What is it all about? So, we need to address the idea of aversion, and this is a principle having to do with actually how the configurations are ascribed certain principal meanings by means of their location with regards to each other, and this is one of them. So when we turn to the lights, because this is actually, it's a bit turned, but it's actually about the thema mundi. Of
Indeed.
course, the Selene is the one, the domicile master of the crab, and Helios is the one, the planet ruling, of course, or the domicile master of the lion. And you can see when you take 150 portions from each of these images, then you arrive at both images belonging to Chronos Saturn. So that means, and this is coming from Robert Schmidt's trait, this is a Saturnine aversion. What that simply means is that the characteristics of these relations have to do with the planet Saturn. So when there's an aversion of this type, you can call it a Saturnine aversion, which simply means you could call it the opposite aversion. It's not quite an opposition, but it's on the other side of the zodiac, with reference to the crab and the lion. So they are Saturnine in nature, which means, and the principle of Saturn is that he ignores, he's not aware of something, and he neglects something when he is aware of it. So that's the nature of the Saturnine aversion. So whenever you have an aversion of an image in this type of aversion, Saturnine one, then that planet is actually either ignoring or he's not aware of it, that he has to represent this image. So he cannot see it, and therefore he's not aware of it.
Let me just ask quickly. So this is perfect. Looking at the Thema Mundi, it really elucidates it with the example that you're showing here on screen. And so could we imagine a chart, any chart with any rising, and we're looking at the first house. We're
Yeah,
talking about the sixth house and the eighth house being in aversion to the
right.
first house. And
Yeah,
those aversions of the eighth and of the sixth would be of the Saturnine nature.
exactly. That's it.
Perfect.
Very
Awesome.
good.
Okay.
So, and these planets are not able to see the ascendant, the ones you mentioned. So they are not aware of it, and they tend to ignore it. So they are sort of unaware of the idea, oh, is it my task to do that? Nobody told me that I had to do that. So
And
that's
also, I don't maybe want to, and so I'm ignoring it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if so, I'm not going to do it. So
Uh-huh.
yeah. Then the other one, the mercurial aversion, is the one in adjacent images. So whenever you have the crab rising and the selenoid moon is in either Gemini or in the Lion, that's an aversion of the mercurial type. And Mercury is one of the more difficult planets in the traditional astrology, because Mercury is the planet of wrestling, so, and debate and discussing and keeping things in the air, not wanting to settle on something. So he can often be a planet of not of discourse, but of difficulty in understanding each other. So these are, Mercury can be quite hostile. So he's more of uh, uh, vocalizing problems and difficulty and anger with the idea that I need to do this. So he doubts his task to be the one needing to take care of this image, and he doesn't want to deal with this. So he's discussing the idea that was not my job, and I never signed for that, something in that sense. So that's a mercurial aversion.
Exactly like a not just a debate, but a contest, not in a contest of like who wins, but a contest in like I contest what you're saying. I'm gonna go
Exactly.
again like a lawyer would or something like.
Exactly. And
And so just
the planet of lawyers, right? And what do
exactly.
lawyers do? They keep things in the air and they doubt everything, and they cast doubt on whatever somebody is mentioning or testifying to. So, yeah,
And they can kind of catch you on a technicality and be like, well, actually, I'm not even responsible for that thing.
exactly.
So then
Exactly.
this an example of this would be if you imagine a first house or a first the first place any
Mhm.
sign, you would see the mercurial aversion in the 12th house and the second house.
Right. That's it. Exactly.
Perfect. Okay.
So this is what we need to understand, because this has something to do. This is an interpretive principle that you can use in a consultation. So you might not be aware of this, or this planet is not the one who wants to do this. So this offers some clues to what you can use to inform a person about what's going on with these images, perhaps. So they are left alone, sort of. So this is sort of it's not maltreatment, but it's an affliction of sorts, because the image is left all by itself. It's left alone. So there is no handle, perhaps, on what this image signifies in any specific chart. So, okay, so let's look at what the joint domicile master actually is about. So this is from the book Definitions and Foundations, the major opus of Robert Schmidt, where he translated about some 30 aphorisms on everything that was never defined in any other source. But these were the definitions that were needed to be able to understand what was written about in other Hellenistic texts, but were never defined. The terminology was never defined. So this is a very important work by Robert Schmidt. So this is a very important one. And here is the one that has to do with participation, which is the term for that. You can read it by yourself. The translation of metoche, the Greek word metoche, has meanings such as sharing, participation, communion, and partnership. So the related noun metochos can mean a joint owner of a house. So let's have a look at some of them, because, and this is from his course in the recordings that he did in the 4 installments of his course. So this is the striking consequence of the distributions of domiciles and exaltations among the 7 planets. So let's have a look at them, because, for instance, Hermes and Cronus are the joint domicile masters, along with Aphrodite for the bull. So you can see here, but also for the balance, the scales, the what we call now.
Libra.
Yes, thank you. I'm so used to this other language that I really need to think about actually the modern terminology, Libra. Yeah. So these are the joint domicile masters. They have to do with Venus in this case. So they are always joined at the hip, so to speak. So Helios and Aries are the ones having to do with Jupiter, the fishes. And of course, the sun is left out here because we are now talking about an image that belongs to the nocturnal sect. So the moon is more appropriate for these images. So here you can see the combinations of these principles. So that's the reason why they are called joint domicile masters. So you can see them again. So let's have a look at the other ones. Here they are. I'm doing this rather quick because it's pretty obvious, but you can see the table all the time in the examples that we have, that we are using. So yeah, that's it.
You can
So,
also pause and just, pause, have a look, take
yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah,
kind of just orient yourself a little slower as you go through the
yeah, you can see what's happening here, and that's the reason why I put the text in there as well. So there's a logic behind it. It's not out of thin air or something. It's really something having to do with the principles and the concepts underlying Hellenistic astrology. So yeah, there
Yeah,
they are.
thank you. And these, honestly, the slides really help. It's really amazing. Thank you for the visual representation.
Thank you. Okay, let's have a look at the method. So this is a random chart that of a client of mine, which I will not be talking about much, but simply illustrating the principle of what's going on and what we can do. So the principle here is that we have the Saclite, which is Selene, the moon, and she's the manager of the 9th place because the 9th whole sign place is the crab. And Selene, the moon, is, of course, the domicile master, but she's in aversion with this image because she is in the 150 distance between these two images. So the moon is in aversion with that what she actually needs to take care of, but she cannot because she's in aversion. She doesn't see the crab, so she doesn't know what to do with it because she's not informed about what's going on there. So that's important to take note of. There's something other that's quite important. Whenever should there be a planet in the crab, then it's of course the domain of the crab and Selene. So that's something that has to do with the dignities. And I really hate that term dignity because it often associates something with something that is sort of elevated, of course, but it's actually about dignitaries, planets that have a certain function for specific parts of the zodiac. And that's the dignity that they have. It's not about, oh, this is a very high planet, very high up or something. No, this is a planet that has a specific task for this part of the zodiac. And in this case, we are talking about the domicile master, which is the task of being the host for any guest, should there be one there. So whenever the host is not at home and not aware that there is a guest in its domicile, well, then there's a problem, of course, because then the host cannot take care of this guest, although the surroundings of the guest, should there be a planet in the crab, are of the nature of the crab and the selenate. Don't forget that. So the principle, so an image never loses its own specific signification when the domicile master is in aversion. What it means is that the domicile master cannot play as a host should there be a guest there. That's an important difference to take note of, because
Yeah,
some think, well, but the crab loses its crabness. No, it doesn't.
yeah.
It's simply the domicile of the crab issues, so to speak. Yeah.
And just like I'll give like a personification or like probably a very like elementary example of this, but it's like let's say, I have my apartment here, right? And
Mhm.
I go off grid on a yoga retreat or something like that.
Right.
My apartment doesn't change.
Right.
Someone could come over, stay in my apartment, break in, or maybe they have the keys, but they cannot reach me and ask me where my things are. It doesn't actually change what's in my apartment or what they
Right.
have access to just because I can't be reached. So,
That's a very good example. Thanks.
yeah.
That really clears it up, makes it really understandable. Yeah. So yeah, this is what every image has. It's simply the principle of what each image represents. So yeah,
Mhm.
but it might be that the host is not at home. So yeah. Okay, so here we have a host who's not at home. So we can look at the substitute planet. Is there one? And if so, then it might be able, it needs to be able to see the crab in this case. So when it cannot see that, then that one, it cannot function as a representative host. So we need to have a closer look at the chart. So in this case, we have, of course, the crab, which the exaltation ruler of the crab is Jupiter, Zeus. And the other one that is a possible candidate is, in this case, Aries, Mars. Now, whenever there is an exaltation planet, that's the one to go for. So that's always the one which is explicitly written in the definitions. That's always the one that is a joint domicile master. But take note, it needs to be able to see, to witness the image that it must represent then. And that's the case. I'm not quite sure if we can see them, but I believe it's in the seventh place. Our
Yeah.
pictures are in front of that. Can we still see that? Because
Yep, yep. I can see Jupiter or Zeus in
yeah,
the bull in the seventh house witnessing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be indeed a sextile, a hexagonal relation. So Jupiter is the one who takes care of the crab. So that's the principle. So you need to find a replacement, well, if possible, because replacement planets needs to be able to see the image that they need to represent them. If that's the case, then you have found the joint domicile master, and then that's the functioning one who most probably takes over the task of representing this image. That
Yeah.
has many
So,
consequences, so we'll get to that in further slides, but that's a very important one to take note of because things change
right,
because
right.
because Selenade, the moon, is no longer the ruler of the ninth place, but now it's Jupiter because
Yeah.
it's representing the crab, and then that changes a lot, of course. So
Yeah, and it's
get
actually
into
quite
that.
it's helpful though. I mean, and this would be the easiest version of this
Mhm.
technique
Yeah.
when you have the exaltation Lord witnessing, because you can just
Mhm.
stop there and that works and that's amazing. So I guess back to my kind of personification or kind of daily example. I'm on a yoga retreat. I can't take care of the home or whatever. But in this case, let's even use the seventh house, but my partner lives in town or something.
Right. Yeah.
And then he can go and host the guest in my apartment or let him
Right.
in and give the keys and whatever else. So then they
Exactly.
have someone to interface with as my guest.
Right. Great. Another good example. Indeed. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. Let's have a further look. So this has many consequences. So I'm taking inventory for this chart because, as you can see in this table, there are about four aversions going on.
Mhm.
So what does that represent? What does that mean? So let's take inventory. I first have a look at Helios the Sun. He's simply the manager of the 10th place and he's operating from the 6th place. Why? Because he can see the image of the lion. So there's no issue there, no aversion. Then we take Mercury, the manager of the 8th place and of the 11th place. And Mercury can also see both images. So he needs no representation by Sunoikodespotes. There is no need for a joint domicile master for either one of these places and images because he can see them. Now we come to one that has an issue. Venus is an issue because Venus, she's in opposition with the scales, with Libra. So yeah, she can see that planet, so she is a representative. She knows what's going on there, and she needs to take care of the business of the 12th image and that of Saturn from the 6th place, which is in itself a very interesting location. But she's in aversion with the bull, and that means that there is need for a joint domicile master if we can find one. So she's in aversion with the 7th place, and this is a mercurial one, the version. So he destabilizes in contest. So you could say in a sense that Venus is hostile towards this task because that's the nature of Mercury. I didn't sign up for that. Contests and doubt that she was meant to take care of all that, what's happening in the 7th place. So the exaltation ruler, in this case, that's the moon for the bull, of course. She takes over management for the 7th place because she can witness it from a square location and a tetragonal configuration with the bull. So in this case, the moon takes over for the 7th place. So, and this is important, Venus still signifies 7th house issues. Do not forget that, but she doesn't manage them. That's the difference. It's quite subtle, but that's the principle behind it. So
Oh,
she's
it's subtle when you think about it in like terms of just like looking at some random
right.
chart. But it's not subtle if you think about like my apartment is still my apartment. Like all
Mm.
of my tools are here still. It's just someone else has to let you in and do
Yeah,
the
yeah,
things for me,
yeah,
whatever, you know?
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So this is the first one. So here we have the table again, so we can have a look of which domicile master can find its Sunoikodespotes. And again, Mars needs one as well, because we can find Mars is, of course, the ruler of the 1st place, the 1st image, the ascendant, in opposition with it, but still able to see it. So Aries Mars rules the 1st place and acts as accordingly. But he's in aversion with the 6th place. So again, denies having responsibility for that. I'm not doing that. That's not part of my job, etc. He contests it. Now, the exaltation rule of Aries, of course, is Helios, the sun, and he's actually located there. So that is a very good candidate. Whenever a planet is actually located in the image that it needs to represent, that is, of course, a very strong position. And of course, Helios is in exaltation there. So perhaps that also contributes to very effective rulership, even though
Yeah.
that whenever there is an aversion, that is considered to be not good in the least sense, in the sense that the place might be sort of abandoned, not quite, but the one actually responsible for what's going on there doesn't is not cannot be approached something in that sense. So that's sort of an affliction. But then we hope to find a joint domicile master. So again, Mars can still signify 6th house issues, but doesn't manage them. So whenever, let's suggest that this has to do with illness of sorts, then they might, of course, be of a Martian nature. Aries Mars is the one signifying the illnesses, but they can be managed by Helios the sun. So perhaps there might be some remedial methods not having to do with Aries Mars, but perhaps more in the sense of Helios the sun, the one managing what's going on there. So that is perhaps something to take note of.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm trying to formulate what this might suggest, right? In what it might mean for a person having these sorts of aversions. Again, we have Jupiter. Looking at Jupiter, Jupiter needs to represent the fifth place, which he can because he can see this image, but he cannot see the second place. And that's a Saturnine aversion. So Jupiter tends to ignore what's going on there. And that's, of course, something different than the debating or contesting the idea that you need to take care of this. So this is more, I was not aware that I was the one needed to do this. So yeah, that's a different sort of relationship between these places. So the Bowman has no exaltation ruler, so we either resort to Aries Mars or Helios the Sun.
And can we just pause there? And we're doing that because we're going to Aries or Mars or the Sun because they are in the same triplicity or the same element. When I'm saying the same trigon, and triplicity lord is confusing because you use triplicity lord of the sectile or whatever.
Right.
So
Trigon is better, yeah.
trigon. So
Great,
we don't have, like, for Sagittarius or the Bowman, we have it being of the fire element, and it does not have an exaltation lord. So when you don't have an exaltation lord, you look to the same element or the trigon, the family of fire, and you see if any of the other family members of fire of that tribe are available to tend to the matter.
That's it. Yeah, great.
Okay.
That's it. Correct. Thank you. Okay, and then we come to, of course, Saturn, and he's the manager of the third and the fourth place, and these are simply functioning because you can see them, and we already talked about the crab, the first example that I gave, because Selene, the moon is in aversion with the crab, so Jupiter takes over for the ninth place. So that's what this is the sort of inventory that you need to do for all the planets in a given chart when you do have indeed aversions going on in a specific chart. So, okay, let's look at the next slide. So then there are repercussions, because then you need to ask the question, who is managing this specific topical place? So in this case, we have, it changes the house rulers and also the specific weaving together of the topical places, because that's, of course, a very interesting topic, because we are always trying to associate what is the ruler of this house doing when it's over there. So when you have a joint domicile master, then that sort of shifts perhaps between places. So you might, I'm not quite certain to say that you might be wrong in associating a specific planet when it's in aversion with the place that it's in, but there are certain new interweavings going on perhaps, and that's an interesting thing to investigate. So when we take this example, then you see that Jupiter in the seventh is the house ruler, that's perhaps the better word, the house ruler of the ninth, and it's not the moon in the fourth. And the seventh is represented by the moon and not by Venus, even though Venus is the domicile master of the bull. And at the sixth place is represented by Helios the Sun and not by Mars, because Mars is in aversion. So that's the principle. And the second place is represented by Helios the Sun and not by Jupiter, because, again, of an aversion. So that means that the satellites, the moon, interweaves the seventh with the fourth. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because the moon represents the seventh because of the aversion of Venus with the seventh image. So there's a little mistake here. She replaces Venus, not Mars. So she does not interweave the ninth with the fourth. But because she herself is in aversion with the ninth, but she's not interweaving the ninth with the fourth. She is interweaving the seventh with the fourth, because she is replacing the inconjunct Venus, that is the domicile master of the seventh, but she's in aversion. So that's the reason. So there's a little mistake here, excuse me. I
Oh, no
did not
problem. Just
know
note
about
that
it.
the Mars glyph should be the Venus glyph. That's
Right, that's it, yeah. When we look at the 10th place, the Sun interweaves the 10th place with the 6th, and that's normal because she can, Helios can see the 10th place, but the 6th with the 6th also because that's the wrong, because he's replacing Mars, who's in conjunct with the 6th place, and also he's replacing the 2nd because Mars is also not the planet that is able to replace the joint being the joint domicile master for the 2nd place, but the Sun is. So there we have this change. So these are the ones going on. So that's what I used to do when I when I drew my charts by hand. I always noted the houses that were represented by this planet. So, for instance, now you see for Helios the Sun is the ruler of the 10th, the 6th, and the 2nd place, which is, of course, quite a difference. Interesting. Mercury interweaves the 8th and the 11th. Nothing going on there because there's no aversion. Venus interweaves the 12th with the 6th, but she does not interweave the 7th with the 6th because she's in aversion with her own image of the bull, which makes her the domicile master of the 12th and not of the 7th, which is a difference.
indeed.
So you can see all the differences going on here. You can see them, and you need to be aware of them. That's perhaps the least that you can do, but perhaps a more pressing matter is that you need to be aware of the fact that not each planet has indeed the significations by being the house ruler of a certain image, because eversions can mess that up.
Usually
These,
we stop there. We say, well, aversions kind of mess it up, like, but how to
yeah,
deal with it.
yeah,
And this
yeah,
gives a lot of interpretive value on how
right.
to do so. Like you're
Yeah,
still dealing with Venusian ideas in the space of the 7th, but now
right.
you have someone else taking responsibility, which would be the moon, um, giving a qualitative interpretive value then for that 7th house.
Exactly, that's it. So interesting material, and the repercussions are quite significant, I think, because this is posed as well, you need to look for the joint domicile mass, and when you do that, but this is the consequence of that. So yeah, you see some things happening in a chart that really represent a shift in what is signified by that. So it's important and interesting. Okay, so let's have a look at an example chart. This is my own chart because I have an interesting chart. I've shown my chart many times, so don't abuse me or abuse my chart. Let's just use it as an example, right?
Yeah,
So,
thank you for sharing.
yeah,
And
no
yeah,
problem.
absolutely.
So let's have a look at my rising image because I have some difficulties there because Selene is, of course, the normal domicile master, the ruler of the crab, but it's in aversion because it's in the lion. So that's an adjacent aversion. So the moon is debating the issue is, am I the one needing to take care of this? So the exaltation rule of course, the crab is Jupiter, and Jupiter is in my 6th place, again in aversion. And he strongly protests. No, he doesn't protest because he's simply not aware of it. So
He ignores. One
he
protests, one
ignores, he leaves it.
ignores.
Yeah, right. So, and then we have the other one, which is the image of the same trigon, which is Aries Mars. Ah, poor me. It's also in aversion. So what do we do with them? So, and now I'm talking out of sort of an experience because now you can see that my rising image is really screwed. So there's no one taking care of that. So what happens then? So none of the joint domicile masters are in a position to manage the affairs of my rising image. So they are even not aware of them, what's going on there, or don't want to be bothered. And that's an interesting take on that. So what do you do then? Now, I simply from experience, I noted that when there is a planet in the image that is left alone, then it might be that that planet is going to take care of this image simply because it needs to work with the stuff that's going on there, and it needs to do that as best as it can. So
Yeah,
that planet is
when I
the
was
one
doing
taking
this,
over. Sorry?
yeah, exactly. When I remember contacting you, because I had been going through the technique and it had always, I had always found one, right? I'd look to the
Mm.
trigon if I didn't have an exaltation lord, and I would be like, oh, okay, this planet can manage. And one day I found out, there isn't one. But the person had a planet in the first house. And I remember asking you, in
Hmm.
that case, could
Right.
we look to that planet? Because let's say then the house is completely abandoned and
Yeah,
someone stumbles across it and they're like, well, there's some resources here. I guess I'll use them to my advantage because no one's
right.
here to tell me not to or whatever. And
So, yeah.
so that actually seemed to work in that case when and it happened twice then actually, and it seemed to sort of make sense for the native
Mm.
that would
Yeah.
happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So even though there's no how do you call it, the person renting the house or the house you bought it from the person, but you still live there. So that planet is still living there. Squatter, is that
squatters, yeah, yeah,
a
exactly.
squatter? Yeah. So somebody he just lives there. So he tries to make the best of it and tries to manage the affairs of being the one that lives there with all sorts of things, trying to make that as comfortable a home as possible. So I take that one. But in my case, as you can see, there's no planet there. So what I noticed is also that I tend to take a planet that can take over in the sense of the planet that has a strong relation with such an image. And in my case, there are several because um, I have three planets that might be I have a big influence on how I lead my life because in general sense, that's what I take to be the representation of the rising image, Vita Corpus Ingenium. So, and it has to do with a strong drive in my case because there are three planets that are pretty close in aspect with my rising image. The interesting thing is that when I was a young man, people, at least people in my surroundings, always thought that I was a very wise man. And, and the reason was simply because Saturn was taking over, managing things. And Saturn doesn't respond immediately. You might think, well, that's different, strange because you have so many planets in the fiery image of the ram. But it's really true. I didn't react immediately, and that's typical something that Saturn does. Whenever Saturn is the one ruling reactions, you not always see immediate reactions. You see sort of an austere reaction to whatever happens to a person, and that's something that I've found very funny because, of course, I didn't associate myself with being a wise man. I wanted to, but that's something else. But in my reactions, the way I carried myself, so to speak, was in a saturnine sense. So people thought, well, that's a deep thinker, and that's somebody who's really he's
Well,
he's
with
got
time,
everything.
Martine, it turned out to be true.
Well, I associate that more with the other planets because I have, of course, my Helios, the sun, in a strong position together with Mercury. So my ambition, and when I was younger, excuse me, I wanted simply to be famous. Point. So I started playing guitar because it looked so easy. Well, that was a big mistake. Playing guitar is not easy at all. But but I simply wanted to do that. But later, that of course became a very strong ambition to be a person of import, and I didn't. Uh, it was not a conscious thing that what happened to me when I started doing astrology, because astrology was simply something that spoke to me very clearly. So that the idea of being famous faded into the background because I found something that was really important for me, which was in this case astrology. Mercury, the planet of divination, of course, by its universal meaning, So yeah, I have the MC in the ninth image, which might also contribute to that. But yeah, so whenever there is a planet in such a position, they can take over management, in this case, for what my Vita Corpus Ingenium, everything having to do with my first place. So that's a default option whenever you have an image that has no joint domicile master, then this is the possibility. What did I? So
Yeah, and I think it's good to like if you're using this with yourself, with your family, with clients, or like I'm not saying like go ahead and just start using this for paid clients or something, but maybe as a side thing and just ask or ask a question. Because
Mhm,
for me with this chart, I would say, oh, well, the sun is upon the 10th and it's also exalted.
mhm.
So I would favor that probably because it's
Right.
also
Yeah.
the sect light. So I'd say, okay, that's a real strong planet. Maybe Saturn contesting it a little bit from being in an
Hmm.
oppositional sort of
Yeah.
sphere, or maybe
Yeah.
even fighting a bit over it. Like I have to say, I'm right across from it. I can see exactly what's going on or whatever. So it's something to ask, or I think the best way to
Hmm.
approach working with this technique would be to like ask Martine, like, okay, so, these planets are
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
suited for this. How did that work in the life? So if you are
Yeah.
going to be practicing with a new concept or technique, the best thing to do is just ask about how
Agree.
that.
Yeah. 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 So you might also ask, so is your wife, your spouse, the one taking over your life? Yes, I can agree with that as well.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Nice.
And
Nice.
that conflicts that in the past there were some conflicts about my Helios the Sun in the 10th place because I was so driven in my career, and then everything else was sort of in the background, and she protested that very much. So that was
Right.
her.
It's like you're like, I'm doing the 10th house here. You take care of everything else. And she's like, wait,
That's
responsibility
not
for
our
you?
deal.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
So yeah, yeah,
that's very interesting. And I'm glad you provided this because you will find, like,
and
I mean,
indeed.
this, yeah, you're gonna find where it's not as straightforward, but this gives you a place to start and a place to look and a lot of really good options when we're talking
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
aversion, instead of just
Yeah.
saying, well, it's averse, so like incapable, but like what? The life still goes on. There's those activities are still being
Right.
pronounced in the life.
And when it's the rising image, it's of course also very personal. So you can also suggest to people, uh, well, when your life is in sort of a mess, try to think about Helios the sun. What's the drive that he is providing you with? Or perhaps you should read a good book about how to manage your life, or ask your partner, etc., etc. So you can offer all sorts of advice based on the planets that have such a strong connection, in this case, simply by being in a strong configuration with it, that might help to understand what's going on there, or perhaps even help to remedy some things that are perhaps not going that well in a certain region of your life. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So if the person is at a place in their life where they're kind of conflicted or they feel lost or
mhm,
they don't have a good strong sense of self or they've been
right.
knocked off course for some reason, they're feeling whatever they're feeling about themselves. You can say, "Well, what legacy do you want to leave?" Like so you're looking to the sun, you're saying like what is your goal to like leave as a
Mhm,
legacy in the world?
exactly.
What is your real life's path? Have you sought out some divination around that? Like read the
Mhm,
book, educate. You could say like, where's education piece in your life? I'm talking
right.
about Mercury here, and then
Exactly.
that could help the person reflect back on the first house, on the self. Okay, I do have goals in this way. I can really see those clearly. And like you said, maybe if you're feeling lost, like look to the other. Can the other give you advice? Can the
Mhm,
partner
mhm,
or the close other give you some kind of sense of direction as to like how you're self-defining?
right.
Um, so
Right.
perfect.
So in my case, for instance, Mercury having to do with divination, that was a very, very big help in my life, simply to have a goal and to move towards places. Because well, when there are no such planet, then an ascendant that is left alone, so to speak, and not managed, then you can really go adrift simply because there is nothing to hold on to steer your life, because that's the function of the oiax, the rising image being the rudder of your life. So when there is no other planet able to steer your life, then you might be in the dire straits, so to speak. So then these planets can really help you get a course in life, which is a very important thing when the descendant is left alone, so to speak. So yeah, that really helped me. So yeah.
I think it's really helpful because, this is a really big case of, the ascendant Lord, and we know how important that is. So in this case, it's extra important to sort of reflect with the person, like who's steering and all of this, but it can be worked out so well. It's like, I'm always at a miss with my family. Let's say it's the fourth place. I'm always at a miss. I don't understand them. I don't know how to deal with them. You can give very practical, like, options
Exactly. Right.
for the person to sort of start working out those situations. So I guess I just want to add here, and we're not necessarily done, but I just want to let people know that you can reach out to Martien. Martien does do client work, so you can reach out to Martien with your chart and say, hey, can you go through this technique with me and offer some support with my chart and the different aversions that happen? Martien is available for that.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and as well as myself, like, but I would first point you to Martien because he's been working this for a long time, but both of us would be willing to go over this in your chart or the chart of family members and help sort of detangle it when you're first starting to use it. But feel free to, practice with your chart, with your family members, and with people or celebrities where you can sit and practice and sort of detangle this. But we are available. And then in the comments below, make sure you ask questions as well. I just want to add that here because you're not alone in exploring this. I wanted to,
Yeah, great. So, oh yeah, I have the 8th place.
Yeah, let's.
So an interesting one. As you can see, Saturn, the domicile mass of the water pourer, is in aversion with it because Saturn is in the 7th place, the adjacent image. So whatever has to do with the issues of the 8th place still have the character of Saturn. Don't forget, that's the principle, because the water power is the image of Saturn. So it's the environment where there are Saturnine things and this in a certain way manifesting themselves. But he, or I myself, the native me, refuses to manage them, which is the normal task of any domicile mass of a topical place. And this is a mercurial aversion, so I don't want to get into that simply because I hate it.
You're like, absolutely not. Nowhere in the contract does it say.
No. Nobody told me that I was supposed to do that. So I need to find other planets that might help me get out of this conundrum. So I can choose either Mercury or Venus because we're talking about the water pourer, and you can see that Mercury, the trigons having to do with this air-like image are of course Gemini, where Mercury is the domicile master, and the scales, Libra, where Venus is the domicile master. So which one to take? Because they have certain contacts. And my chart is a day chart. And then I have to see which one of these two is perhaps the better one. But that's difficult because both of them, when you take Mercury rising after Helios the Sun, then Mercury functions as a nocturnal chart. And Venus is, of course, also the planet belonging to the nocturnal sect. So, yeah, there's an issue. So I'm not quite sure which ones to take. As I said, we normally choose the one of the sect in favor, but neither of them is. So then the question is, which one is taking over? Is it Mercury being in a sextile configuration, or is it Venus having to do with a tetragonal relationship? Well, actually, I think it's both, because as you can see, of course, the first one that I strongly associate with what happened was, of course, astrology, because I did start astrology because I was fascinated with Jungian psychology and the possibilities of astrology being able to shed light on all these things. So that was a very important trigger for me to be, well, that really had a very big impact on me. The ability of astrology to go so deep into all sorts of things happening in a person's life, and of course the psychology of all that is very interesting to take note of and learn about yourself in that sense. So that was a very interesting one. But another one is Venus, because I also started doing re-evaluation co-counseling. That's something coming from America, introduced by Harvey Jenkins. Perhaps you can read about that. It's very interesting, and that really helped me develop a very interesting manner in dealing with clients and also with the issues that they had. So these were two very important things in my life, having to do with managing, of course, also my own eighth house issues. And of course, at first, I also, as everybody did in those days, associate the eighth place with everything that has to do with what is repressed in yourself. So that was the first fascination. I'm not quite sure if that is the case of the eighth place still, because that had to do with the association of the Scorpion with the eighth place, which is not correct. You cannot define house themes, issues of a certain place with the association with a certain image, at least not in the sense that we normally have learned in our early days of astrology. In traditional sense, you need to use the thema mundi for that. So that's a different discussion, but that's an interesting one. So yeah, I can clearly say that both Mercury and Venus have really helped me understand what's going on with my eighth place. So again, I joined Domicile Master, and it's a very interesting one. And of course, it's so strongly related with my 10th place, because it was sort of my profession. It still is, of course. I'm still doing astrology and delving deep into whatever is going on in somebody's life. And Venus is, of course, has to do with being in groups. I was teaching this astrology, etc., etc. So, yeah, there's a very strong connection between these things going on now. So,
yeah. And it's interesting that you would say that you think kind of both of them are candidates and you've seen both of them work, because I also have seen that same thing with aversion in my chart, actually, where there was two possibilities, and I see the ways in which both of them have influenced the outcome. So it's like, you know, as Martien was saying, like the eighth place, we no longer think about as like repression. We'd maybe put that in like the 12th house, you know. So it's like, but if I was to ask Martien, you know, the partner's finances, inheritance, taxes, something like this, we're looking at the eighth place. I'd say, you know, how would you deal with the partner's, you know, finances or sort of inheritance, and even not knowing, I feel like I could ask, and not knowing personally Martien's stuff, but maybe like looking at it from the outside, you know, the career would help take care of the partner's finances, as well as, you know, your career would in astrology be a part of your financial contribution, I would think, to the spouse as well. And then if you're sharing finances in that way, if you know, I know you're married, so that spousal kind of support in that way of taking care of the finances of the home and the partner. And then maybe I would say, you know, we have a legacy here. It's like whether or not, Martien, you are given, and we can associate it with the family because of its trigon relationship with the fourth as well. So the eighth place and the fourth place. So whether or not Martien receives like inheritance or taxes or bills or litigation from the family, we can also see that part of that legacy perhaps could be in the 11th place of inheritance, right? Like inheriting good relationships and good friendships as well. So even something as simple as that, I think, would probably track, would it not?
Yeah. What I found very interesting is that in zodiacal releasing, of course, the first place where it started is the location of the lot of diamond, which is in the eighth place in my case. But when the second place started, which is the fishes, the exaltation ruler of the fishes is, of course, Venus. And the interesting thing is that in that period of my life, I started doing re-evaluation co-counseling. And in the first period, which was still in the water power period of the eighth place, I started learning astrology. So there's also perhaps a timing factor at work there, but that's simply something I noticed. I'm not quite sure if that is such a big issue, but I found it very interesting that I did separate things when I was in another period of my zodiacal releasing. So that
Yeah,
perhaps
that
that
actually is
might
interesting
play as
because
well. Yeah.
yeah, it very much is because that would show like through timing,
Hmm.
right? You're seeing actually those planets that are able to respond to that house
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
pinged, right? So it's like, okay, there's timing and an activation of this place. Who's going to respond? And you have those
Yeah.
planets'
Yeah. Yeah.
characteristics being pinged through that timing technique. So I actually think that adds another layer to this uh maybe a credibility as well to where,
Right.
and you should
Yeah.
try this with timing, right? So it's not just a general house lord idea, but
Right.
also if that planet, I'm sorry, if that place is being awakened through some type of timing
Hmm. Hmm.
technique, you also could use those planetary responsibility, uh the
Right.
Venus and Mercury in this case taking responsibility. You can actually see that coming to life through timing technique as well.
Yeah. 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 The interesting thing as well, I um, the mercurial approach to my eighth house issues was, of course, astrology. And
Mm.
in re-evaluation co-counseling, there is more of an emotional approach to whatever has happened in your life or whatever was a difficulty. So in that sense, the idle place, which is the eighth place, is the idleness of what's going on there, is then addressed by means of these planets. And yeah, they can be very, let's say, um, whether or not they are difficult or not, but reevaluation co-counseling also has a lot to do with principles of oppression, not in the sense that you are battered or something, but simply the things that are going on in society, which put a certain label on a person. So I'm from the working class background, and being working class has certain principles that are instilled in you simply because you grew up in those circumstances. And that's also something that review, evaluation co-counseling addressed. And that was very interesting because I had never thought that that would have had such a big influence in your personal makeup, so to speak. So that was a very interesting discovery. But I really appreciate the difference between these two approaches. Mercury is astrology, which is also very technical, typical of Mercury, and Venus is the let's say the soft approach, and also the approach that enables you to deal with all the emotions that you have around all sorts of issues and topics in life. So that's an interesting one. And they were hidden. And why are they hidden? Because that's the eighth place, the idle place, where things perhaps have a strong influence. The Saturn is, of course, in the seventh place, so it had an influence on my relationships, of course, unbeknownst to me, because Saturn is in aversion with the eighth place. I was happy-go-lucky, but the eighth place was sort of left behind, and then it came in full frontal view, so to speak. So,
And I feel that is also super interesting how they're connected as well, because you're talking about like, you know, how we are sort of how like our, I don't want to say like how our brains are trained, but kind of like a worldview that comes from, you say you're from a certain class or from a certain
mm,
city or
mhm,
something like this, where you get this certain track that's playing in the background. And you also have, with the Mercury and Venus, their natural significations that make a lot of sense. But
mhm,
also, you have that ninth house and that 12th house, because Venus having associations with the ninth place and
mhm.
Mercury having associations with the 12th, you're
Yeah,
also bringing in some of these ninth place sort of characteristics as well as the 12th house characteristics. So
yeah, yeah,
that's also really cool.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what slide I still have. Oh no, this was the end. of the presentation. So, okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Martine. Awesome. Thank you. I've
Yeah.
been very excited for this. I know that you have as well. I'm so happy to be able to get together and do this and present this with you today. Thank you so much for the work you've done on this. I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
not an easy task to work it out. The slides
Mm.
were amazing. It's such a helpful thing to have worked out. So again, many blessings. Thank you very much for that. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure.
Thank
Um,
you for allowing me to show it again. It's so great that I've found you guys because you offer a podium to do this. So
It's
really,
amazing. And your
thank
channel's
you.
amazing too, which you explore a lot of awesome techniques that I'm greatly interested in. And I was very happy when I even found you as a teacher, and now to have you as a colleague and friend is so
And
awesome.
indeed, we're
So
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's blessed, and it's always like so fun. It's like very exciting for us. Um,
Mhm.
so Martine's channel is, expert level Hellenistic astrology. So with each video, Martine supplies these like awesome slides. So go over there and check out some more. The Lots is an amazing talk. And we'll have anything that is sort of pertinent to this linked below to this episode. So, like we said in the beginning, you're going to see this feature on Planet Dance. So that'll
Yeah,
be
yeah.
really nice.
I've written him asking him when he knew his wizard would be up to date now, but he's at work. He lives in the UK, so I think he's at work, and I'll get an answer perhaps tonight. So
Yeah,
I'll let
good.
him know
Yeah,
if he has an idea when his new wizard will be installed in Planet Dance. So
we'll
I'm
keep
looking
you
forward to
updated.
it because I saw some screenshots and I sent them to you as well. They were
Yeah.
really, that's going to be really be all sort of tabs so you can address all sorts of separate issues. It's going to be great. Yeah, really great.
It's amazing. Thank you very much for doing that, both of you. And then, and what's his name? I'm sorry, because I'm not.
I know him as Ed Greek, but Greek is not his last name,
Okay.
of course.
Well, anyways, first name is fine. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Martine,
Ed,
for working on that.
yeah,
I think it's going to be valuable for people to be able to. I mean, people now, astrologers are so used to being able to like click a button and sort of like interact in that way.
hmm
But it's a relatively simple delineation technique that you should be able to do even without the Planet Dance app, but it'll be
Yeah,
really
yeah,
amazing for people to be able to
it
have
is.
that.
Yeah.
Um, so also, what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, tell us about what you're working on your Patreon right now.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, on one Patreon, I'm still doing the zodiacal releasing tapes, which have to do with a very deep investigation of that method because there are a lot of things that are there's a habit in the astrological world to want to look for hits. So when somebody has some dramatic career change, then many times people look for zodiacal releasing and want to find a hit. But the method itself is also a standalone, so you don't have to use it. You can use it with other techniques, but it's also a standalone. And it's, yeah, I'm still learning because
Mhm.
when I do these videos for my Patreon channel, I'm still uh,
Working
uh,
it out.
working it out for myself. I have a big database for everything that happened in my life. The last years are more more detailed than the first years of my life. But that's really helpful to try to understand what's going on with this technique. What do you see with it? So
Mhm.
that's very interesting, and I hope people will still subscribe. There are still people dripping in wanting to learn that, and I really appreciate that. All the support is welcome, but it's also very interesting to learn that method for yourself because you can see so much with it. And my other
Yeah.
Patreon is about trying to go deeper into the, let's say, the ritualistic principles that are at work in the background of astrology. I know that fascinates you a lot, and also fascinates me because when I started studying traditional astrology, I sort of lost the background philosophy that you can find, for instance, in Jungian astrology, because that has a massive theory behind it, which explains why you do it that way. And we can connect with that in the traditional astrology, by the use of trying to understand the ritualistic principles that are in the background of our astrology, what you do with that and how you can use it perhaps in trying to understand what, for instance, the 7 hermetic lots signify in a person's life. So that's and again, I'm learning a lot of that myself by doing these videos, and it's very interesting. So yeah.
It's extraordinarily interesting. And I think what's, why we find so much kinship, Martine and I, is like we have that similar approach. And I think if you would go to Martine's Patreon, or again, like the study group we're doing with Maternus or Demetrius' book, which is like, we're not teaching, like at least me, I'm not like sitting here teaching you Firmicus Maternus. We are sitting here reading it together and really not struggling, but like coming together to really understand, wrestle with the ideas, pin them down, try to understand what's being said and how it applies, and just doing that like critical thinking and that investigative work and like really putting it into practice. And I think that's the most fun thing with astrology. And I think you would agree.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to do that, especially as traditional astrologers in this time, because there's so many good questions, and really working with those good questions is part of the fun. Not saying that we have all the answers, but if we can kind of bring these concepts in and really ground them, a lot of amazing work come out of that. So I'm looking forward to talking about that ritualistic level, I guess, that plane of existence, having to do with the lots. So maybe at some point we can come back and talk about that. But you are investigating that in your Patreon. And then we do have, in the background, I know Martien is doing like some amazingly interesting work when that, our conversations are brilliant work when it comes to that. Yeah, absolutely. And then we also have a couple more videos like lined up. Like we're always working on things that we want to bring forward. So, look for that. We have a couple more coming out that we're also interested in and excited to bring forward. So, Martien, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure again. Thank you everyone for joining. So Martien's audience, the audience here, thank you for participating in the comments below, and we have links for you to check out. And yeah, until next time, everyone, take care. Happy holidays. Bye.
Mata o kaka bersama yo demikian da soba kena mata iban nak kau mati ma demikian